A word to the wise. We are an explicit podcast tackling content with motherfucking adult themes, as well as entering spoiler territory if you aren't caught up with us. We have read through Chapter 11 of Dark Age, the 5th installment of the Red Rising series by Pierce Brown.
Hey there, this is Cross.
And I'm PJ.
And I'm questioning why PJ swore in the intro, because that kind of counters the point of giving a warning. We are Words and Whiskey, a podcast for veteran and novice readers alike. We tackle fiction novels and love to talk about what we're drinking. You should think of us as your intoxicating weekly book club.
You know, Crossland, this is the second episode of the 5th book of the series that we're tackling. I don't think people are jumping in at this point. So, you know, I figured I'd play with it a little bit.
I don't know, man. I don't
can take it out if you need me to.
No, I think it's good to leave it in. We can leave it in. We don't need to dub over it or go aggressive or anything like that. Fuck. Today is our second episode covering Dark Age by Pierce Brown, and we are going to tackle chapter 7 through 11. PJ, what are you drinking? Or what would you like to finish your sentence? I'm sorry.
Nope. I'm going to talk about what I'm drinking.
All right,
so I got a recommendation from Sharkbait on our Patreon Discord server to drink a lavender gimlet. I had a lavender plant outside, and I also had a rosemary plant, so I put some rosemary in there too, and I already had some rosemary simple syrup. So what I did, took 2 ounces of gin, 3/4 of an ounce of lime juice, half an ounce of rosemary simple syrup, half a sprig each of rosemary and lavender, shook it all together, garnished it with a lime wheel, and pierced the lime wheel with the other halves of the sprigs that I took from both rosemary and lavender, and then served it over a fancy like spherical ice cube and took a picture of it in the lavender plant. I really like how it turned out. It's delicious. Sharkbait, this was an awesome idea. This was so good.
It sounds amazing.
I say was as if it's all gone. I've got about half of it left.
Jesus Christ.
We were preparing for a long time.
We were preparing for a long time, and Tim Olson jumped in and was having a conversation with us for a hot second, and we had to talk about when, you know, a bunch of other things were happening, so it just kind of went on.
Yeah, so
as it does.
I was just sipping.
Last week, it was Andrew who jumped in the middle of our recording.
Yeah, he did.
Oh, man. Yeah.
I am following that up with a very, very good beer. It is the 2019 vintage of Morning Delight from Toppling Goliath. It is an imperial stout brewed with maple syrup and coffee. Bourbon barrel aged, I believe. I'm pretty sure it's bourbon barrel aged. And
so
the maples.
Go ahead.
So the maple came out so strong. It's mellowed a ton. The maple has really overtaken the coffee at this point, but it is drinking so well right now.
Got it. So it's a drink now kind of a thing.
I mean, right now, as in like 2 years after I got the bottle.
Okay. So you have an older bottle.
It's a 2019 bottle.
Got it. Okay.
Yep.
All that I was going to say is that Tim Pearson, one of our patrons and one of our longtime friends, gave my parents a bottle in response for the wine bottle and, you know, kind of stuff for us to share variously, just shipping stuff back with Bing when he came back. And one of them was a Morning Delight because he was like, I'm not going through all that I have. So
probably the same one. You should tell them to give it a shot. It's
well,
really...
they're not gonna drink it without me because I requested that they don't. So.
Well, that's fair. So yeah, you've got this to look forward to.
Very, very excited. That sounds amazing.
This is an annual release by Toppling Goliath. There's a very limited number that they produce. It's a lottery to have the opportunity to buy 2 bottles. And it's so good. It's so good.
That's crazy.
Yep. What about you? What have you got?
Garrett, Iowa. I am sadly kind of boring because I didn't have quite enough time. I was finishing up the last session. We did kind of shift our recording schedule a little bit. We finishing up the last session of a writing class. And so I had to get some of the various edits and stuff like that in for writing. And so I didn't have, and went on a walk, usual kind of exercise routine. So I didn't have a whole lot of time. I wanted to make the lavender gimlet. I will probably do something similar. I might do the martini that was suggested next week, but I am having a gin and tonic this week. The usual stuff, usual suspect that I've been having for the last couple times, the elderflower tonic that I made, which is, again, diabolically good, and the End of Days barrel-aged gin, which is unstoppable, as mentioned before. Yeah, it's incredible. To follow that up, I'm having a beer from Edward Teach, which is a local brewery here, called the Pontus Double IPA. It is a double dry hopped IPA with El Dorado and Amarillo hops. I know what you're thinking, PJ, and you're like, those are two of my least favorite hops.
I like
El
Dorado.
At the very least, Amarillo. Okay, Amarillo, generally my least favorite hop as well. I don't know what it is about. There are two breweries down here that can actually brew with it, and it's incredible. But they're the only two that I've ever liked beer brewed with Amarillo hops, ever.
You've liked Fad. From
Fad was okay. These are good.
Okay. There you go.
But like Fad was very drinkable, and I think it's an acceptable beer. These are like, I would go back constantly for these. So it's very, very citrusy. It's grapefruit, a little bit of bitter, but it's so drinkable. And Amarillo for the most part also stops me in my tracks, in my mouth. It's just bleh.
A lot of people really like that hop. The strange thing is, I don't know if I just poisoned everybody, like, as far as their opinions go, but all I taste is, like, not good. Like, not a good version of freshly cut grass. Mm-hmm. You know? Like, that's what I get out of it. So, I don't know.
And it might be a less is more kind of a thing that they figured out over time. You know?
Yeah, that could be. That could be it.
Versus a kind of traditional hop. But I get no grass. I get no nothing on anything.
Good. Perfect.
All right. With that, we get into last week's predictions. We have two-ish here. We're going to go with the first one. Do Ajax and Diomedes actually fight, maybe in the bleeding place? You said...
Nah, but they do rib each other a lot.
Was that last week?
Yeah, they met
It was last week. Yeah, whoops. Yeah. All right, well, this is not a prediction that comes true this week. This is not... They don't fight or rib each other.
They don't really... They don't interact.
They don't interact at all. Yeah, right.
So I guess I drink?
Skip or drink.
I'll drink for now, but we can still leave it on there.
All right, sounds good. I'm in. And then this is one that was kicked off right off the bat. The question was, what is Operation Tartar Sauce? You said...
Those engines will be used to create a tidal wave, which the forces will ride into battle, maybe in a rigged out star shell made for underwater battling. It's wrong, but the spirit of it is kind of right.
Here's what I'm going to say. I'm going to say that we don't have the full answer here yet.
We know it creates a hurricane.
It is creating storms, yes.
I think I'm wrong. I'll drink.
I think you're also wrong. All I'm going to say is that we don't have the answer to the rigged out star shells thing.
We don't. That's true. But
so I'm going to remove the question after this, but I want to clarify that, like, you're just wrong.
Okay. Fair enough.
Was that a good clarification?
No.
All right, drink, motherfucker, drink.
Okay. Do we want to go over the last one?
Can we trust anyone? You asked yourself.
No, and shit's going sideways as it always does. Shit begets shit begets shit.
I think you're right on that. It's not
but it has nothing
issue.
To do with trust. Yeah.
Yeah. Shit does beget shit, does beget shit, does beget shit. So, yeah,
so,
it's...
maybe we just push?
I think we just push. I think we'll just push on that one.
Sounds good. Well, actually, somebody did betray him, didn't they? Like, there was some...
Who? Atalantia kind of...
We don't know who yet.
Back against Scorpio and, like, lied there and kind of made her own moves.
As far as Darrow goes, though, like, aren't they speculating that somebody betrayed them?
Oh, that potentially someone did, but he wasn't even sure. Yes. I believe that was even in last week, though, when they were talking about Elusia versus Angelia, wherever the city is that they end up.
Angelia, yeah.
Yeah, so I took a drink, you take a drink, that's a push.
Okay.
All right, with that, let's get into the chapters. Chapter 6, Lysander Carnivores. Obviously, the chapter title is kind of referring to a number of different things, including the carnivorous plants that are all around, as well as the sort of political landscape that we see and Hypatia, the chameleon snake, but the number one carnivore in the fucking room is Atalantia Algrimus, a visage of beauty and terror. Her language has this kind of like very languid feel to it, almost like it could reach out and bite you just like her snake Hypatia could, if you weren't too careful.
Dude, I want a chameleon snake. There's so many chameleon things. There's so many chameleon things just in this section. And by that I mean two. Two things that shouldn't be chameleons that are chameleon-like. There's the snake and there's the wolf cloak.
Okay.
So I think what it's saying is the peak evolution of everything is chameleon.
All right.
I think that's the assertion he's trying to make.
Okay. I think what's really interesting, just from a historical standpoint, even I'm in on it, PJ. I'm in on you becoming a stealth man, and I'm in on there being some secret conspiracy.
Imagine if I could be sneaky. I'd be unstoppable.
Yep. Yeah, PJ, that's all you need. That's it. That was the thing. It's a good call. Hypatia, just from a historical perspective, you're gonna go from there to like teaching me historical shit. I'm trying. Okay. I'm trying. It's a very small kind of thing, and I think that this is really the only way that it really plays in. She was a Platonic scholar, and so she believed in a lot of Plato's thoughts. She was an astronomer and heavy in mathematics. She was a big deal in terms of a number of different philosophical and mathematical theories in the long term. But I think maybe the reason for naming here is more the sort of counselor attachment, where Hypatia is kind of like the pet that gets all the whispers in her ears for some reason. I feel like that's the connection, more or less. And she was also a counselor, a wise woman who was brought in to a variety of different senatorial chambers and debates and whatnot. So, yeah, that's a tiny little bit.
She takes on the Sophocles role for Atalantia. Yeah,
but for
as far as like advising and making decisions based on just ridiculous shit that the snake does.
Kind of like Iago from Aladdin.
Yeah, exactly.
Definitely not good decisions, but they're decisions. Fair enough. But what do you make
before you go on from that, just because you brought up the term Platonic, is that the same origin of the like Platonic, like as in platonic friendship or platonic relationship? Is that based on Plato?
Yeah, totally.
I had no idea.
Yeah, welcome.
All right.
It's an extraction of Plato's philosophy for platonic friends to exist. And we talked about it a little bit with Mather, and they were mentioning Cicero, I believe, and sort of some of the context there. And yeah, Mather. Can't say anything right today. But yeah, that's totally where that comes from.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah. What do you make of...
I don't remember ever having a conversation about that.
Interesting. Fun. Wait, the other conversation? The conversation about Cicero?
No, about Platonic.
Oh, got it. Okay. Yeah. What do you make of the political discussions in the additions of the Falthi, the Vodums, and the Carthi families into kind of this political atmosphere of the society?
I think the fact that there was a decent amount of arguing and disagreeing with each other gives a lot of depth to the adversaries of this book, instead of the sort of stereotypical look at the bad guys and how bad they are. Get them. We get a more in-depth understanding of their motivations and what makes them tick, and just kind of their inner workings, which is really nice. It makes a lot of sense with having the sort of multiple point of views on opposing sides, so I guess I can't really call them a strict adversary of the book, but it just brings a level of depth to the actual fight and the actual war that's going on.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think that is a huge point. With all of the various families, I think it adds a little bit more character to the society on the side of the way that these families bicker and kind of the way that they're always going to be vying for power. You know, one of the things that we haven't talked about yet, and I don't even think I raised kind of the question here, but like Apollonius is another vector that's even posed inside of this chapter versus Atalantia. And that's another giant family here that has to be, considered inside of these arguments. He's setting up a lot of dominoes that could topple one way or another.
And there's Julia Bologna.
Yep. Who's absent, notably.
Absent and not technically, or not necessarily allied by them, Or not allied by everybody in that room.
Oh, yeah, definitely not necessarily a positive voice for Atalantia.
Right. Like there's there's a whole lot of complexity when it comes to who's on whose side and how many sides of this war are there.
Mm-hmm. That's very true, especially all of the different angles that there are inside of this conflict. I can't help but agree. And I think about it all the time. It's so beautiful.
Mm-hmm. I hope this war goes on forever.
Oh, man. How'd you feel about the way that the Corps mocked the death of Romulus?
Oh, man, that was strangely, I was surprised by my own feelings on it. It was strangely infuriating. I guess it makes sense, and I really shouldn't care that much, but sort of the idea that gold represents honor and respect kind of got thrown out of the window there, but Lysander has been talking about that forever. We've seen it not be true, so I shouldn't be as surprised as I am, but man, it was really upsetting, strangely.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you. Especially on this reread, it hit me as this sort of moment where it's like, you know what? Lysander has some points here. Lysander is definitely correct in his sort of assumptions about the core golds, and not even assumptions, his knowledge of the core golds and the way that they behave. And Romulus was an iron gold, and the way that they kind of treat him as this sort of vile thing makes sense in one aspect. It makes sense in the fact where he betrayed them because he ultimately did turn his backs against them given the information he had at the time. But it kind of hurts as a realization that their opinion of this character that we got to know fairly well in the last book is basically, the fuck is that dude? We don't give a shit. He's dead. He killed himself. Wow. Mm-hmm. And that is frustrating. I agree with you. Strangely infuriating, without a doubt.
Yeah.
So this is an interesting quote that I really appreciate. It's Diomedes pitching himself to the group of administrators underneath the dictator Atalantia, and Diomedes is kind of standing up for himself and saying, rather, Atalantia addresses Diomedes and says, "These are not injurious queries, Diomedes. If I don't know how strong you are, why would I choose you for a dancing partner?" And Diomedes responds, "Because all others are taken, and the song creeps upon crescendo." Man, brilliant writing, incredible way to kind of lay out the scene as it stands. Just fantastic stuff.
Yeah, I agree. I do think it's less him trying to convince Atalantia that she has no choice and more Diomedes kind of calling her bluff and proving that he's not a really weak tactician. He's not going to give up all of his important information just because she's asking for it.
I think you're right. I think that's super reasonable. As far as that sort of conversation goes, I think you're entirely correct, because Atalantia has proven over the course of this chapter to be an incredibly gifted, I don't want to say stateswoman, rather. She is incredibly talented, and she is a gifted liar. Yeah. I would go so far to say a brilliant liar.
Yeah, I mean, she was pretending to be your dad for a year or so.
Mm-hmm.
That's
right. 3 years, right?
Was it 3 years? Yeah, whatever it was.
3 years. Yeah.
I mean, that's a tall order for a woman who's probably 40 years younger than him. Mm-hmm. How old is she?
I want to say she's in her mid-40s. She's the youngest of the sisters. We know that a decade passed, and Aja was in her 40s or 50s, so it's got to put her in her mid-40s.
No, Aja was older than that, wasn't she?
I think she was in her 50s.
The Ashlord was over 100.
Correct. Aja was at least 50, and Atalantia is...
I thought Aja was in her 60s.
Nope, at least 50. But Atalantia, according to details, based on people's math, between 46 and 48 is the approximate age.
Okay.
Given what we know about Moira, Aja, the Ashlord, and the timeline. So that's kind of... It's Ashlord, one of those things where it's not well-defined, but...
Getting busy as a 60-year-old.
I mean, yeah, man. If you live to 130,
But also Atalantia was posing as a 110-year-old man. That's a tall order.
Also true.
Not that she was actually impersonating him, but...
No, right.
That's the joke I was trying to make.
But the imposition of power that she made over everyone else is impressive.
Oh, yeah,
and I
absolutely.
think that gets into what you're saying.
She is... I was just trying to make a comment on her impressive lying skills.
Yes, without a doubt.
Yeah.
Her cunning talent there. Man.
Yeah, that
as such. Well, no, I got it. I thought it was clever. I didn't think it was a joke fully. I thought you were just being clever. One of the things that I find really interesting is we're talking about kind of this bluff that she's playing is that she similarly calls for Diomedes to fall tomorrow with an iron rain, and he declines. And I think that this is kind of that cat and mouse game of pressure that we see between the two of them in this political conversation. Stepping up to fill his place, of course, is Seraphina, and she agrees to kind of be his surrogate. Do you think that this is an acceptable trade in any regard? And what do you think the Rim back home would make of this demand and Seraphina stepping up to fill it?
What do you mean by the trade? Like the trading Seraphina for Diomedes?
Yes, a raw for a raw.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's totally fine. I don't see a problem with that at all. But I think the request itself is perfectly reasonable. She makes a pretty good point with how can I don't remember if this is exactly the quote, but something along the lines of how can I trust an ally tomorrow when he won't fight for me today? It's not necessarily technically part of their agreement, but I think it's a reasonable request in that both of them gain something by teaming up. So she needs proof that he's going to be, or the Rim is going to be helpful. I doubt the Rim would really appreciate Seraphina taking Diomedes' place, but that's not on Atalantia. That's completely on Seraphina, so I don't think that matters so much.
Sure. Yeah, and I totally agree with you on that. That is Seraphina's fault for stepping up. I think that Diomedes was kind of in his right to refuse, because that was, in a way, that was counter pressure for Atalantia to need to step back and think about it.
I mean, it was negotiation.
Yeah.
Like I don't see a problem with negotiation in this respect at all. But at the same time, I don't see a problem with denying the proposed alternate terms. So,
right, yeah, in all ways, it could have walked away with it not being a Rim deal, but yeah, instead we got Seraphina instead. It's an interesting point, I think, to ponder on, which is why we've been here. Yeah. This is a long Lysander chapter too. It's like 16 pages or something like that.
Very long Lysander. It's not quite half of the reading, but probably like a third of the reading.
Yeah, right. This chapter conveys a lot in terms of the kind of politics and the political speech, and it's beautifully done.
Right.
So after that, Ajax wheels on Lysander, punching him in the face, and asks him to explain himself after he understands Lysander has been Cassius's ward for the last decade. What do you make of the two brothers and their relationship, as well as their relationship to Aja and the Grimaces? What complications do you see arising in the future, if any?
Well, there's obviously a very old and very ingrained friendship and relationship between them, and with that comes a lot of trust. But they haven't seen each other in a decade, so that trust is kind of weak at this point. So it's holding. It is holding through Lysander's explanation of why he didn't come back and where he was and all of that. But that decade that Lysander was removed from the court golds will show its face a little bit more. He's going to he's changed. He's diverted from the true tenets, I guess, of the core golds, and he's trying to fall in line more with the iron golds and what it means to actually be gold. But that doesn't necessarily fit. So that's going to strain the relationship more, I think. And there will be some petty arguments that shouldn't matter, but I think they'll kind of come to a boiling point a couple times.
Okay. I love that. I think that's a great read on the relationships, especially as we consider the painting, which I think the painting is such a brilliant plant inside of the story where Atalante considers the dead really kind of faded and gone and basically just erases them out of this family portrait. Almost as though they're maybe also stepping stones to her becoming the only viable option. There's kind of something there. I don't know. What did you make of the painting?
Something there.
Yeah.
At the same time, I agree with you, but I can see it from the perspective of they have gone to we get a lot of mentioning of the void. So they've gone to the void, and this is who they are now. Like, this is a portrait of now, and these people are gone, so they are void.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you. I think in large context, I wasn't saying so much that was my point. It was just a thought that I had when thinking about that is, does that apply that way? It reminded me in particular, have you seen, this is a fun literature question, have you seen or read the Harry Potter movies? Books? Harry Potter series?
Book 4.
Through book 4. Book 5.
Maybe like through half of book 4. For both of them.
Book 5 introduces really the sort of Sirius Black tree, the family tree with Bellatrix Lestrange and a bunch of other things like that. And there's kind of a similar thing that happens when they die. Their faces on this animated family tree get like blacked out or get like crossed out because they died or they become animated. Can't remember what. Sirius is blacked out though as he's removed from the family tree because he's excised because he's not a Death Eater like the rest of the family. That reminded me of that. It feels kind of like an interesting, not perfect parallel, but something reminiscent between the two stories.
Okay.
Anyway, I just wanted to mention that.
The way you described that sounds similar, yes.
Oh, yes. Quite. On that thing that I haven't seen and know nothing about. Yes. Ajax and Atalante oppose excellent points speaking to Lysander, and I fucking love this. And I'm gonna read the whole thing to, kind of explain it a little bit, but I adore this for a number of reasons. We'll get into it after I read it. Still wants to be Marcus Aurelius, I suppose. We understand the war inside of you, Lysander. We always have. But that does not change that this is not the return you should have had. Not for you, not for us, not with them. You squandered yourself. You should have come back a god. Think of how I could have used that. Think how your high-minded dream could have benefited from that. And this is a brilliant breakdown, I think, of the problem that kind of exists inside of Lysander's head, is that his ideals really only exist inside of his head. He doesn't actualize them. And as such, actualize sounds so bullshit in this capacity, but, he's left being painted as this philosopher who sits in a library and thinks about things. But even Marcus Aurelius, who he dreams to be, wasn't just a philosopher. The dude was a warrior. He was a general. He was on the front lines of battle. He died waging war. And, he was sick. He didn't die from the battle, but he died from a sickness that he caught while he was out there. And, that's the reason that he's the most popular of the Stoics, is because he was a true philosopher king. He really embodied it. And he moved and did things through actions. Lysander just thinks and imagines.
Yeah. So that was a lot of stuff to take in. But
I just love this bit.
I'm gonna start with towards I guess it was probably towards the middle of what you were saying, but towards the beginning, first chunk. Think of how I could have used that, was a quote from Atalantia. It's a pretty selfish way to go about making an argument for like the benefit of Lysander, but that's kind of something Lysander said about Atalantia from the beginning. Her relationship with him was kind of based on what she got out of it, and that was actually beneficial for him. So, commoditize? What was the term that he used in the last section? I can't remember. I don't know. But going forward from there, Lysander is primarily kind of a man of thought, but more and more recently, he's becoming a man of action. Though that's new, it's still kind of true. Like in the bleeding place, he took it upon himself to jump into the ring and stop the fighting and like announce to everybody who he was and why he was there. And he's doing that more and more. you know?
I agree. Yeah. I think that's out of necessity, if that makes sense. Like it's true. It's out of needing to prove himself in a certain regard. And even in the later chapters, he realizes that his beliefs tucked in libraries are almost foolhardy compared to sort of the brutality of war and the reality of it.
Yeah. It's true.
I think it's brilliantly written, though. This kind of expose on you act. I think it was something along this line a little bit later, but like you act like Lorne, as though Lorne didn't crawl. I think it was Pytha who says this a little bit later. You act like Lorne, even though Lorne would walk down a corridor and he was a living death machine, cutting everyone apart. Can you do that?
Was it?
Lysander was like, no.
It was Pytha when she was talking about how you need to be feared.
Yeah, right. And he's like, I shit myself. going into the spit tube. Yeah, no, it is a brilliant
he didn't
example.
He
no, he didn't actually shit himself. Right, and he vomited.
Which is kind of the same thing.
Both were expected results. I think it's just such a brutalization of Lysander in a way where he basically gets put through obstacles, and is he going to go through them, or is he going to try to go around them and struggle to make it through his problems? I mean, gets back to a core, the obstacle is the way, Marcus Aurelius thing. Like, what you gonna do, man?
Mm-hmm.
And so then Lysander asks to fall in the Iron Rain with the rest of the Warriors of Mercury, and thus pave his path as the last remaining member of House Lune. What a decision.
Do you think that's partially motivated by becoming a man of action?
I think so. I think it's him realizing that he has to. I think after being harassed and addressed in this way, he's kind of coming to that conclusion that he has to earn that scar in order to be respected.
Right. Is that how you actually earn a scar? Being in a reign, or is it something within a battle that you have to do in order to earn a scar?
I think it's definitely conflict related. It's like I think about it, and I think this gets described. I think it's explained. So I'm going to shut up.
Okay.
But
good to know.
That is an answer that's coming soon.
Deal.
Yeah. All right. Neat. Yeah. But I definitely understand kind of the curiosity there. The only lean-in that I would say is Golds had to earn scars before the Institute existed to separate themselves. So how would that be done?
Yeah. I'm more curious what the process of earning a scar is.
Got it. Yeah. And that makes sense. Mm-hmm. So Chapter 7... Darrow, the Calm. This chapter is really interesting because it's very short. It's 3 pages. We haven't had one of these in a while, but there's kind of a meta context to it because it's so short. The calm before the storm is very short. I don't know. I kind of read that as like a sort of punch in the face in a way where there isn't a whole lot of time to sit and think about things before action demands us to do something. So very little to talk about inside of this chapter. A couple of things. Sevro's little monsters. They don't feel whole without him. The army may miss its mascot, but the pack misses its big brother. I've been too much a distant father of late. And the men and women are clearly worn thin as this chapter begins. The morale is very low for the entirety of the free legions on Mercury. How does this make you feel before we've kind of entered into the conflict at large?
I mean, setting aside the actual like morale aspect of it, there is a sense of bleakness and looming absolute desperation. But I kind of see that as a good motivator for Darrow and the Howlers, kind of likening it to hunger, which drives ferocity. So I think it can be a good, like, this is our last stand. This is what we're fucking doing. Like, it's now or never. We're going to fucking die if we don't give it our all kind of deal. Hopefully that's kind of the way that they take it at this point. But it's also kind of interesting that both Darrow and the Reaper are shitty fathers. Maybe they are the same after all.
That's a funny analogy that I didn't pick up on this go round. That's a good point.
Yeah.
Fuck. It's even in the quote.
Mm-hmm. You literally read it to me.
Yeah, I did. Fucking hell. Oh, man. But I think that's an interesting point. I think it's a great point that, like, clearly the morale is brutally low, and he's hoping that this sort of like last stand for life might do something. But as we learn later, not even the war chants are enough for this shit. Like, oh my God. Woo. Speaking of this shit, the Fear Knight has impaled an entire city, leaving their corpses as a forest, a self-described forest outside. And my God, is this absolutely ferociously brutal.
It's pretty fucking horrifying, if I'm being honest about it. But describing it as a forest is a little bit over the top, right? Like, a forest is like 20,000 trees.
Have you ever seen one person impaled?
There's 200 people. That's like an orchard at best.
You've got to be kidding me. Yeah, fine. I'm dying inside. So we learn a little bit more about the storm gods. The fact that they're these, we know that they're old and that they were going to take time to generate a storm. We know that it's a storm now. Obviously, it's kind of in the name. You know, I thought you might put that together maybe a little bit. They don't make an exact connection. There's an assumption that the storm gods are the engines that they were repairing. Is that true? Or are these different? I was going under the assumption that these are the engines that they were repairing. The engines, yes. So they're engines, but what are they engines of? Would be the question.
Yeah, but it never says, like, these are the engines we were repairing in the last section. It just says these are the storm gods. And there's the assumption there, but in the previous section they were referred to as engines, and here they're referred to as storm gods, and I'm just making sure that we've got we're talking about the same things.
Well, they were also referred to as storm gods in the previous section.
Where are they now?
Yes.
Interesting. I missed that.
Yeah. Okay. All right. That's fair, and that's fine. There is so much, it's worth pointing out even, there is so much going on in the first 100 pages of this book, 150 pages even, in the entire fucking book. Like, this is chaos abound, and it's remarkable, it's excellent, but it's very easy to miss stuff here and there. Yeah, I mean, we're obviously taking a deep dive, but it's even that. So, after kind of discussing the storm gods, there's a brief parable interlaced with that about the pit vipers, and Darrow decides to pull the trigger and initiate Operation Tartarus. What were your thoughts on the parable and him kicking off the Stormy Boys?
The Stormy Boys. The Stormy Boys of Operation Tartar Sauce. We know that there's sort of an edge that he has to balance on, much like the Pit Viper story, which is obviously the reason why he brought it up. Too early, it tips off at Atlantia, and too late, it doesn't fucking matter anyway. So I hope he's right, but at the same time, that parable about pit vipers is very, very dependent on instinct. Just interactions with pit vipers and taking them out with the sling blade is very dependent on just like reactions and instinct. So I'd like to think, in this moment when I was first reading it, I like to think that he was trusting his instinct and really kind of timing it properly. And it kind of seems like that works out. There's the monologue or internal monologue of Lysander later in the last chapter. I don't remember what chapter, but he's looking down and seeing the infancy of a hurricane, which we know is coming from the storm gods, but it seems like it's just kind of, from his perspective, a natural occurrence of a giant storm.
Yeah,
so,
that's chapter 10. Yes.
That is chapter, okay.
Yeah, the last Lysander chapter, like you said.
Yep. So I think, as far as I can tell, he probably made the right choice. He probably made the right timing choice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a fantastic read on that. I dig it. Man, it is a... Oh, what a book. What a set of chapters.
What a book.
What a book. What a book, you know? Like, what a story. With that, we move into chapter 8, Lysander the Machine. This machine isn't Bert Kreischer's machine. But is in fact... Everyone's just going to get drunk on vodka in Russia and rob a train?
Yeah. Why wouldn't you do that?
Because I'm the machine. But it is, in fact, an act of militarization. And let me say that I never thought that I wanted all of these various preparations that happened to be so perfectly described and explained to us.
Descripted.
But it is nearly perfect and absolutely fucking brilliant.
Yeah, it's awesome. And it really kind of makes the idea that it's a machine that's being built and being designed. It produces that sort of feeling when we're presented with the term "the machine," and then we're seeing all the little parts of this battalion preparing. It really, I don't know. It made me feel things. I really liked it.
Yeah, could not agree more. This was an incredible little section here, without a doubt.
Mm-hmm.
So I wanted to bring up something, and this is pretty minor, and this is almost more of a question of sorts to folks as well. So feel free to leave a comment on Instagram, write us an email, what have you. Pytha here denotes herself as an equites, which is a term for Roman cavalry, and it feels like the closest we get to a real term of superiority within the color. We have like Docker as a minority kind of thing that was addressed long ago in Golden Sun, but I kind of just wanted your thoughts. Do you think that feels like it is something that could be a color, being that they're equated to like a cavalry leader in a way? Like a Rose or a Peerless Guard?
I don't think it's quite that. It seems more like a position.
Sure.
So like we've got the...
Imperators.
Yeah, Imperators. We've got the... in Darrow's case, we've got the Drachenjager...
Folks, yeah.
Operators? Would that be the right term? Operators for them? I don't know. I feel like there's a more specific term for that one, but it feels more like a position, like Imperator. It kind of feels like a praetor kind of situation.
Okay.
So it's a high position within the high part of the color, but I don't think it's a different section of the color, like rose or stained or peerless scarred.
Okay. Yeah.
I don't know.
And like I said, I think it's more of a question, and I think I agree with you on the way that aligns. It's just interesting because blue is one of those colors that we don't know what the super blue is, if that makes sense.
Cobalts.
Yeah, you would think cobalt would make sense. Okay. Thanks for that. We talked about this a little bit earlier, but I want to just reiterate it. Pytha's speech to Lysander about his chasing of the Iron Gold status is actually something that, to me, makes him feel a little bit less honorable in a way. At least he's aware that he isn't one. That's important. But as Pytha rightly points out, you want to play the big game, fine, but you play to win. And what a smart commentary. I think that her entire point is comparing him to Lorne and saying that you have to do what you need to do in order to make sure that you earn the status of Iron Gold. It really comes down to that one thing that we said earlier, and it's about action and taking action as opposed to sitting on the sidelines.
I feel like he really kind of shows his youth in this little sort of section.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if this is the right way to describe it, and I don't know if I'm muddying myself, but his reasoning and his desire are a little bit off center. Like, he knows what he wants to be, and he knows how he wants to be perceived, and he assumes or conflates them to be the same thing when they're two not necessarily opposite things, but not necessarily the exact same thing, Yeah,
that makes sense.
I'm trying to find a better way to describe that. Trying to think of, like, I don't know, it just seems like an immature understanding of what an Iron Gold is.
Underdeveloped, yeah.
Underdeveloped. I mean, that's a better term. Not immature, but less totally understood.
Yeah. Especially when even Pytha brings up the person who's most commonly referred to as the modern Iron Gold that we're all very aware of, which is Lorne Arcos, right? And the dude earned it through battle and also contemplation. Like, it wasn't just the fact that he was sitting there thinking, as Diomedes was kind of trained by him to think, but it was his actions that really made him kind of the component of an Iron Gold that was kind of respected in that way.
Exactly.
Oh, man. And they load up into the spit tubes, or they're about to load up into the spit tubes, and god fucking damn it. If Ajax's speech doesn't make my skin have goosebumps like Seraphina's, and then suddenly feel cold as though it's gone goose flesh as we see all of our heroes' names read aloud. What do you make of the familiar rituals and the speech from Lysander's perspective?
All right, first of all, I got to address this. Did you just use goosebumps and goose flesh as two different things?
Absolutely, I did.
Are they different?
I think of them as different. I think of like goose flesh as like cold, clammy fear and excitement pre the bumps, or like different than the bumps. But I think that they are used interchangeably, truly.
I always assumed that they were the same thing. But
yeah,
in this speech, there's the names that are spoken off. And Cadius, Harnassus, how do you pronounce that first name?
Harnassus Cadius? Cadius Harnassus?
Yeah. Cadius Harnassus, which, fuck his parents for naming him that. But do oranges not have an elemental middle name?
Don't know. Don't have a good answer to that. I can't think of one. If anyone knows, send us a note. Definitely interesting. I couldn't find any in research after you wrote that in the notes, of course. But
as far as Lysander's perspective goes, I think he has. I think it gives kind of an interesting view. We get to see this presentation, these theatrics, I guess. This ritual. Ritual is probably the better term. In kind of the same way that we see Darrow, that we see from Darrow's perspective in Golden Sun, I think. Is it Golden Sun where the first Iron Rain is? Yeah.
No. Oh, yeah, Golden Sun. Yep, Golden Sun. I thought you said Iron Gold for some reason.
But the internal monologue and the understanding of what's happening is way different. Lysander talking about the human flaw that he suppresses, unlike Seraphina, who's absolutely shaking in envy. It was a little bit more insight into the true desires of Lysander, but when Darrow was seeing this, it was rage, but it was also desire. Like there was a lot of feelings, and but it wasn't like I want to be that person that's talking. It was fuck that guy, and we know Darrow became that guy when he launched his own reign. But I don't know. It was an interesting perspective. I enjoyed the scene. Truly.
I totally agree with you on the side of the Golden Sun comparison. I think that is a brilliant thing to bring up here because they do have very different perspectives. One had a warrior's perspective and one is a philosopher's perspective on the whole thing. And they are fundamentally different people. As much as we compared them as being similar in the last book, here's where we start to get the delineations really between the two characters, I think.
Mm-hmm. We do.
Yeah. Love it. Any other thoughts there? On the Iron Gold component, I mean, I wish I would have grabbed the book and read through it before really like jumping into this just to do a 1-to-1 comparison, but no, at the moment I don't. Okay. Yeah, I think it only gets more intense a little bit later here, but yeah.
Oh, it gets very intense later. What the fuck are you talking about? Like,
you're right.
This shit's tame.
You are onto something with tame. I found it interesting that the term the society side uses, they use the same term blood red, and blood red means kind of I feel like it means different things on different sides of the war. The society kind of terms it this suicide wave. How accurate do you think it really is? Do you think it's easy to step back and say that the low colors are always going to have kind of a deeper, vast tide as far as it goes with soldiers marching to their deaths to fight for the Republic? But is it really the kind of suicide that they paint it as?
On an individual scale, no. But I think on a grand scale, yes. We get the comment from Darrow during Iron Gold about the red tide, which is effectively the same thing. It's just overwhelming them with bodies.
Even back in Morningstar, it was the
Was
red
it
tide.
Morningstar?
It was also Morningstar, yeah.
Okay. Either way, like it was. I don't know if they used the term suicide run or like. I don't know if it was even brought up at all as a suicide anything, but it was kind of inferred that way. It was like we've got way more people. They're not trained, but we can just kind of throw them at them and overwhelm them. I think we even talked about it in our show. Where I talked about
no doubt we did.
Yeah. So like I know I don't think Darrow sees this as anything but that, but probably has more flowery terms to describe it.
Okay. All right. So from Darrow's perspective, he would use a different term, but the societies you feel is correct from their perspective.
And I think really, when you boil it down, it's the same thing.
I feel like it's a little bit under assumptive on the society's part to call it kind of a suicide run, if that makes sense. To not realize that those moments have done immense damage to the society. Even if there are a ton of deaths, that's really just throwing the more bodies you have in a conflict. Sometimes it's all you need.
I think Darrow would just call it heavy sacrifice.
Yeah, of course.
But is that not still suicide?
Well, war is a little bit different, but I mean, I think that it's dying for a cause, versus
martyrdom.
I guess like suicide.
Not really martyrdom.
Suicide is painted as generally a selfish decision. War is kind of inherently selfish. So there's something there. I see where you're poking at. I'm just not sure how I feel about it entirely.
Yeah. I think where I'm coming from is that Darrow is okay with losing a large bulk of people for the cause.
Mm-hmm. But his use of the term blood red seems to be not in a sort of suicidal rage so much as it is like going on a killing spree, right? That's how Darrow and the Howlers seem to be, like Thraxa is throwing around the word. And that's kind of that perspective. And so that's what's curious to me, is that they even think about it a little bit differently.
Okay, so we're talking about the difference between like blood red and red tide from Darrow's perspective at that point, right?
Yes, I'm trying to pull it away from red tide. Well, yes. So
that's
the society describes. Yep, the society's blood red is a red tide from Darrow's perspective, and blood red from Darrow's perspective is a frenzy.
Yeah, but I think the society, or the core golds, because I don't think they're really the society at this point, are they?
Society remnant, I think, is how they're described.
Okay. They don't have the internal communications of Darrow, so they don't necessarily know what he's talking about if they hear the term blood red.
Mm-hmm.
And if they hear the term blood red and they've heard the term red tide, they might see those as the same fucking thing. And they might, like, the descriptions might be talking about two completely separate ideas in general. And it's just, we don't know what they're, like, we don't know the inner, like, discussions or inner, like, code names for things. So this is what we see, and it's tied to that code name. This is what has happened, so it's fucking suicide run. I don't know.
Totally. No, I think I agree with you. I just find it interesting that there are even two different definitions, on signs. And so it's
yeah.
That does make sense, especially when you paint it that way, that they think about blood red in a different way than Darrow thinks about it, because of that specific view of them appearing to be suicidal, and Darrow is in fact instead thinking about it as a frenzy, as a last ditch effort.
Right.
Or as a rage. Yeah, that makes sense. I just think it's an interesting comparison.
More perspective than anything else.
Yeah, without a doubt. Oh, man. And Lysander finally comes to term with what Serafina was really after this whole time. She's been hungry for war.
Yeah. Yep, she is. And that fact makes the idea that she took Diomedes' place in the reign so much more terrifying.
Yeah.
Like, she wants to be here. Like, this was her fucking goal from the jump, I feel like.
Isn't that awful? Isn't that strange?
So cool.
Okay. All right. Fair enough.
I'm so excited. I'm so excited to see her fighting.
It's so interesting to me that you're fascinated by this. I think for me, Serafina really interestingly, and I think purposefully and intentionally, reduces Serafina a little bit to say that this is all that she's ever lived for. And I think it actually paints her more similar to Bellerophon than Diomedes in a way, I think that she had this sort of edge of seeming to have a little bit more nobler intentions, and now to kind of backtrack and be like, oh, you're a 16, 17-year-old who's about to waltz into this. Like, okay, so it's naivete that was propelling you in a way.
I feel like she's a little bit smarter than that. And I think she can have multiple motivations, but
yeah,
the one that's prevailing in this moment is her desire for war. I don't think that takes away from her other motivations. It just puts them lower in the priority queue.
There is definitely a number of quotes regarding youthfulness and war that are not coming to my mind right now from Winston Churchill, but it feels like one of those probably embodies Serafina. It'd be really great if I could actually recall the quote.
Youthfulness. What?
That's a word. What do you mean?
I'm just fucking catch a predator.
Oh my god. You'll never let that up.
No, because it's fucking true.
It's funny, but yeah.
I wasn't even planning. I was planning on dropping that, but you're bringing up youthfulness. She's 16 or 17 years old. All she wants is war, but she's grabbing at Lysander's dick.
Is she grabbing at Lysander's dick, or is Lysander reaching?
Ploy to get him arrested.
And with that, Chapter 9, Darrow and Gelia. And we are once again introduced to a beautiful mess created by Alice Au-Ra. And we once again haven't met the man, but we finally kind of get some of the pieces of his story here, which I think is fascinating. He's an exiled Olympic Knight. He was exiled to the Rim, of course, and he is maybe a bit of the sadist. He didn't actually go to the Rim, sorry. He was between the Rim. He was in the asteroid belt, the Kuiper belt. Maybe a bit of a sadist.
Fuck if that's not an understatement at this point.
Oh, no.
A bit of a sadist.
Yeah. He's really good friends with Brutus Au Argos, too.
Vlad the Impaler was a bit of a sadist, is basically what you just said.
Well, yeah, maybe. Speaking of the sadism, the field of bodies that Atlas leaves is absolutely terrifying to walk through from Darrow's perspective. Of course, because of course you like walking through this forest of bodies would be insane. It's really just grisly. Darrow's immediately afraid of booby traps, but also reflects on how being so removed from the war can simplify it down until it's mostly just an annoyance that people face, like on television, on the HC. What do you make of Darrow's reflection on the Senate and war, and also kind of his thoughts on Alice's cruelty?
I mean, it seems like total bullshit, honestly. Like, he says that this was the reason why he left Luna, and that doesn't make any fucking sense. Like, just based on how he's always acted, I don't think he's lying about his feelings that he has for the horrors of the front lines of war. Clearly
it's almost more like he's reminding himself.
He's trying to make his own decisions more meaningful than they were. He's trying to apply these things that he's seeing as reasons for why he went forward with things, but like, let's not forget that this war and this specific battle is because he left Luna, right? Like, yes, things would still go sideways and shit would still happen. They would still be at war. But this specific battle does not happen if he doesn't leave Luna. So he can't cite this as the reason why he left Luna.
I think it's an extrapolation in a way.
I don't think it is. I think it's him trying to justify his actions and trying to put the blame on the Senate for the horrors that he's caused. Yes, he's probably sick of the Senate's abstraction of the front line, but he left to continue this war. His goal, for sure, is to end the war. Like, that's true. He's always talked about wanting to end the war, but that's the point of war in general. Nobody goes to war to make war continue. They go to war to end the war. Like, that's just what war is, right?
PJ, I 100% agree with you, and I am with you on the side of Darrow in the way that he kind of thinks about the sort of the Senate and sort of their removed nature. And I think you're right that this is kind of another justification in Darrow's action and in some ways inability to accept the consequences of his actions. Because the reality is that this may not have happened had the peace gone through. He may have been able to withdraw the troops and give them Mercury. And while that may have been a bad long-term strategic move, at the very least he would have saved people and yada, yada, yada. The list goes on of mental gymnastics that we can do outside of the story that may have happened. And I think, by and large, this is Darrow trying to create, or rather I think in some ways successfully creating a lens in which he is giving himself a reason as to why he continues to fight this way. I think in a very stoic way, it's important to, in the sense of stoicism and whatever what the Iron Gold stand for, I think it's important for him to contemplate the past, but to be in the here and now. And this actually feels like a strange moment where he's going against that and he's justifying things when, by and large, he doesn't need to. This is an immediate cruelty. You want to stop the cruelty. You don't need to justify it as an extrapolation of what the people back at home see.
Do you think it's a justification to himself, then?
Oh, entirely. He is entirely justifying this to himself. This is a lie that he's casually telling himself. Not a lie, but like a half-truth.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
I love Darrow. Love the man to pieces. Absolutely a phenomenal character. But also it's important to recognize that, A, he has been the number one liar to us through all of the POVs. And he's the only one, I think, that's actually lied to us through the POVs. And B, that makes us have to ensure that we question all of his decisions at least a little bit. At least a little bit. Everything that he says has to have this tone of, what do you really think behind it?
Right.
Darrow quickly discovers a festoon of different things going on in Angelia. A pathogen that made men tear each other apart, the potentially booby-trapped men on poles, and finally, an overloading reactor. The Howlers barely escape the explosion, and the bodies of the forest are all but destroyed in the rolling wave of destruction. They are destroyed. They're obliterated. And this is sort of the cruelty of war against the society remnant. Atlas seems to be thinking and playing things just like Darrow might have long ago.
This is exactly something that Darrow would have done. This is a Rube Goldberg machine that Darrow would have set up.
Mm-hmm.
Like, absolutely. Like, this is straight out of his playbook. And I'm sure he's jealous he didn't think of it.
I don't think you're wrong, for the record. That laugh was not like that was not a decrying laugh. That was Darrow just isn't quite, I don't think Darrow's gone quite that far yet, but I don't think he's that far off either. You don't have to look further than what he was doing with Apollonius. The entire idea of freeing Apollonius is to put other people in jeopardy in the same way. So it's just, it's hard to even consider or think about.
Yeah.
Ugh. It's also worth noting here that in the original script, I misplaced Ajax and Atlas here, and that is very easy to do.
Yeah. When I first read that, I made a little comment. Ajax/Atlas is the new Harmony/Holiday.
It's even worse because they're son and father. And then the legions fall. The plans have all come into place, and Darrow sends Thrax off to lead the fight at the Children, at Pan, between the two maps. This is where I think actually the map becomes very important, because this can get very confusing very quickly. And oh my god, fuck, dude, does this book get so big as this war escalates in this moment. We've been rolling this slow ball of dung momentum for so long, and now that shit is rolling downhill, picking up more as it keeps rolling down the ship pile, and ship against shit, just like you said.
Yep, it's pretty true. I'm so excited. I'm so fucking excited. This sort of moment of chaotic restructuring of the plan, the comms, the organization, fucking everything. It's just satisfying. It's just satisfying to read. It's terrifying for Darrow. And putting myself in the situation, it's absolute mayhem. But it is bonkers how crazy, happy it makes me feel to read it. It is just so well written. I love it.
I've mentioned this to you off air a number of times, but I absolutely have wanted to reach this kind of point in the series and to get to kind of these sort of cruxes, these high moments. And the series is full of a lot of them that go somewhat occasionally unparalleled, but oh my god, is this not incredible and in some ways better than some of the same emotions that you might get out of cinema? I can't think of moments that roll this momentum forward for me so hard that I like stay gripped to my seat in the same kind of way. Outside of some like horror movies which require that, but
yeah,
I don't know. Like, just what's your thought on the medium of reading again, coming back in with the series as the example?
This book specifically, or this series specifically, and Pierce Brown's writing in general, makes it really hard to imagine action scenes. And I know this is not that, but action scenes, I'm just kind of going off of converting to cinema and the differences between reading and watching. I think because watching something has to happen in real time, unless you're watching something in slow motion, which has its own place but isn't necessarily great constantly. In reading, you can slow things down without it taking away from the actual action of what's going on. So you get these really in-depth dissertations of what's happening in a razor battle, which happens over the course of like 10 seconds, but it's pages long. So just the rate at which information is described is not something that can be done so easily on film. And I think that's what's really appealing here, and is what's keeping me engaged more than a lot of movies and TV shows and what have yous can do.
Okay. I was just curious. It was just something that popped into my head right here. And it was like, how does PJ feel about reading now? But
well, I'm for it.
I'm for it. And, you know, we discussed this a little bit already in terms of the organization you'd made mention of. Darrow dishes out the rest of the orders to Severo, which isn't Severo, it's Rona. And she's, of course, embarrassed. And Alexander and the rest of the Howlers. This scene, this moment of preparation for war is a fantastic one. Hazard Bedlam is called, and all the war just sort of raining down on itself. It's an incredible, incredible moment, and one that the Howlers and most of the others know spells their deaths and their dooms. This is not a fight that any one of them can admit or knowingly consider that they might win.
The lack of immediate action by the Howlers kind of says a lot in general, but specifically in this passage, there's a lot more to it than this, I'm sure, but between the lack of morale due to all the shit that's going on between Darrow and Severo and the leaderships of the Republic, and just the bleak nature of what's going on in this war, like, what the fuck are they supposed to do? Are they supposed to trust Darrow in this? Are they, like, do they have any actual motivation to listen to him? They kind of have to. Like, the alternative is just sitting there and fucking dying. But, like, this is kind of, as far as I can tell, rock bottom for the Howlers in general.
There is something interesting here that I think that you kind of keyed into a little bit. There is this sort of, they've been in conflict with the Society Remnant for 10 years. And there is a sort of inevitability almost that feels apparent in the scene where they're like, we were always going to lose. There's a surrender. There's something natural after Darrow had gone missing and sort of retreated, and without Severo as has been mentioned. And it just feels like a culmination of a decade of like, we still haven't beaten them, and they're still beating us back. And we're going, like, this is, the odds are insurmountable in this situation. They've been staring up and like fatiguing, not because of food, not because of wounds, but because they look up and they see their inevitable doom. And it is insurmountable to them, I think.
I mean, is for the older ones specifically, for the older Howlers, it's like, I allied myself with this really charismatic dude in high school, and now I'm a 30-something person, and I'm at war with the entire society that I grew up with. Mm-hmm. And I feel like that realization has to happen at least sometime with a bunch of those guys, you know?
Yeah, without a doubt. And that's why I also think that follow-up speech, him realizing that all of them are still kind of like staring, looking at him blank and not having any hope, Darrow gives this kind of rallying cry, which I think is a speech that even rivals Bill Pullman's from Independence Day, the president from there. And it's a brilliant speech. It's a brilliant moment. And then as the speech finishes, as he's done, the chapter ends with mushroom clouds blooming in the fucking distance. Like, oh no.
Yeah, man. Like, it's an inspiring speech, but that inspiration kind of gets trampled by the fact that there are nuclear bombs being dropped on the area.
Oh no! Yeah, I know. It hurts. It hurts so bad. This book is so good. This book is so good. I just have to keep reminding myself this book is so good.
It really is.
As I get,
it's so good. It's so good.
I get beaten down by it again. Yeah, it's man.
That's what makes it good, though, isn't it?
Right. Yep. It is. He says to himself knowingly. All right, so chapter 10, Lysander, the Ash Rain. I think Lysander's reflection on the stupidity of bravery and how he pretty much would have been better like growing up as a scholar is kind of a lovely one in a way. Every frayed nerve, every quaking cell screams in horror, urging me to crawl out of the tube to escape this insanity. Is a man a coward if he realizes that bravery is just a myth that the old tell the young so they line up for the meat grinder? And I do, ouch. So good. Good work, Lysander.
I don't know if I agree with you. I don't know if I agree with you with the good work thing there. That seems kind of like the view of bravery of an unexposed scholar. Bravery in this case, I would say, would be standing tall and fighting for what you believe in despite knowing that you're in a meat grinder. It's not overcoming the fear of the unknown. It's overcoming the knowledge of the reality of the situation and still fighting for what you believe is right. And I think his view on bravery is the non-warrior's view of bravery. And what he needs is, like you mentioned before, the philosopher king's view on bravery, which is kind of the abstraction of the abstraction.
Yeah, he should almost be, to your point, he should almost be viewing it as the necessary meat grinder. And I almost bring this up as a how does this make you feel about Lysander kind of a question. Do you think that he's turning the right way in terms of turning away from the scholarly and towards the warrior, or do you think that he's still kind of, I mean, what do you make of Lysander?
I guess it depends on if he would actually be, if it would be possible to climb out of that spit tube. Is that a possibility, or is he stuck there? Because he says all I want to do is climb out.
Yeah, I think he's stuck.
So if he's stuck, then no, it doesn't change my view on it at all. But if he's able to climb out and chooses not to, even though he wants to, yeah, it changes.
Because he chooses to stay, despite
he either chooses to stay or knows he can't do anything else. Like
sure, yeah.
It's dependent on that.
Yeah, I think I agree with you. I think that this quote actually kind of makes him, in a way, a little bit ignorant of the necessity sometimes of bravery in a number of contexts to solve the problems of humanity against groups. So whenever there are two warring factions, bravery is always important, be it in negotiation or in war.
Yeah. I don't know if the term armchair philosopher applies here.
I think it does. I think I'm with you on that.
Yeah. Like, it seems like he's trying to be very philosophical about a topic that he knows fuck all about.
That's definitely fair. I agree with you. Good stuff. So we move on. Lysander focuses in, realizing that he's going to have to survive this drop through the mind's eye. And this is, of course, a tool of focus for him. But it's also one that seems to call back memories when he focuses into it. What do you think we're going to see with this over the course of the story, given its importance and Atalantia's desire to know its secrets?
I think we're going to see a lot more of Octavia, which is, I think I mentioned this beginning of Iron Gold, end of Morningstar, something like that. That's something I really desperately want out of this book series, is more information on Octavia and her life. Maybe it was some other time. I don't know. I remember talking about that on air.
I think it was Iron Gold.
Could have been Iron Gold. Anyway, I think we're going to start seeing some corruption work into Lysander. because now he's going to be in sort of a wartime situation and a warrior situation, which he's never been in before. And we're going to see those teachings come to him. And those aren't necessarily the teachings that he wants or believes in. They might be completely counter to what he believes in. But their memories and their thoughts and their meditations, I guess, at this point. So I think we'll see a little bit of a change in Lysander due to the Mind's Eye.
Okay. All right. I love that. I love that. I need to... I really kind of like the component that you're talking about with the way that this corruption might work its way into, or I would even pose maybe work its way out of, as Lysander gets to kind of confront his demons, potentially, as we even see different moments kind of slip in and out of him. I think that there is definitely something there.
Mm-hmm. I think it's more like old lessons that he never had anything to apply to. Like he never had a situation to apply these old lessons. And they're not necessarily aligned with what he truly believes in, but they're the only lessons he knows. So recounting those, the wartime philosophies of Octavia are not necessarily what he wants to achieve or wants to strive to be.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay. And again, there are few sites in this series that rival that of imagining an Iron Rain. And the Ash Rain on Mercury is no fucking different. It is cinematic and beautiful in every way.
I fucking want to see this realized on the screen.
God, the rest of that flight down, it's just all riveting. Of course, we've already mentioned kind of the cinematic aspects and whatnot, but do you have any favorite moments?
I think the quick maneuver that Lysander pulls when he sees the sort of purple glow of the charging up railgun and hits his shoulder thruster and like ducks out of the way in time. How many shots? Like 40 shots or something like that? Or was it hundreds over the next 3 seconds?
Yeah, that we're going through that space. Right?
Yeah. This is fucking crazy.
The one that there are 2 different points that get me. One is when he's pointing his laser to blow up a base so that it can be bombed from orbit, and he's beaten to the punch, I think by Seraphina at the time. That's a good moment where it's like, you're not as fast as the warrior, you little pixie. And then there's the other moment when Ajax and he are having conversations, and they're like, the simulators. it's just like, you're in for a treat. And the whole thing kind of has those are 2 of my favorite moments from this entire chapter.
Yeah, it's good.
So
good stuff,
without a doubt. Cool. With that, the final chapter of the week, Chapter 11, Darrow, Red Reach. This chapter opens with what I think is one of the most metal and awful lines of the entire series. Chapter openers. My army dies. Those 3 words carry so much fucking weight, given what we've seen.
That's a tough thing to say out loud.
Dude, it's suffering on the page. It's suffering in the brain. It's suffering as you think about it. It's just, especially because we've been on the other side of this conflict. We've watched it all happen, and we see it go. It's just a wild one.
Mm-hmm.
All of these different moments at the Red Reach are portrayed and bonus art provided in the Sub-Press edition, and man, is that artwork absolutely beautiful. The whole escape scene with the Necromancer just has this like manic energy made manifest that I absolutely love here.
Yeah, you posted the link or a link to the actual artwork. Dude, this shit's fucking dope. This looks so fucking cool. Oh, man.
It is absolutely insane the way that looks. And it just makes me like wish for the eventual series. You know, like this gives a painting of that imagination of what exactly is going on in the scene that we're flying by. And beautiful.
Yeah, I think we'll put a link to that somewhere, probably in the show notes.
For sure.
We'll probably like post. Can we post links on Instagram? No, I don't think we can.
We can't post the link, but I can share the photo with credit.
There we go. We'll probably maybe do that. I don't know.
Regardless, if you haven't seen it, go look it out. Red Reach, Sam Burley. That's what you're looking for from Dark Age. My God, the battle, the scene, the sacrifice of the blues, the gearing up, the discussion of the Arcosians, Widow's sons, the Drakenjager beasts. What a moment this fucking is. Like I said previously, we've got this shit dung ball that's been rolling downhill since the beginning of this book, and we are picking up terminal velocity. I honestly don't have other words for how good this fucking chapter is.
Yeah, this is seriously the best chapter of any book I've ever read, ever. This is my favorite chapter of all time. This is so fucking good.
How could you expect us to like try to get specific on the insanity that is Called Away the Pilot, dodging and ducking, and Darrow jumping in the way and taking bullets to save him? There's just there are just so many different fucking moments that are brilliantly written over the course of just a couple of pages, and
Yep.
Don't make me choose.
Yeah, I mean, all right, think about it like this. He has a reputation for being just such a great pilot, right?
Mm-hmm.
He's cheating.
How so?
He is the ship.
Well, that's the blues are always cheating.
I mean, but all right, imagine this. You are a NASCAR racer. And you have this telepathic connection with your car.
Mm-hmm.
And you can basically just be on the field with these other cars that don't have the same like telepathic connection as you do. You're going to fucking win. It's not going to be fair, but it's also not fair to say you're the best driver of all time, right?
Well, I would back up just a bit and say that most of the people in Ripwings are probably blues. Like, blues are pilots by all account. But just to kind of feed into your point a little bit, the moment that you said NASCAR racer and car, my brain went cars. I am Lightning McQueen. I am Lightning McQueen. And I couldn't help but imagine, that little moment. But I mean,
yeah, it's basically like that.
I'm with you.
Okay, yes, you're right. Everybody else is doing it too, so it's fine.
Lots of people are doing it too. I found the comparison when talking about the skill of Call Away. I found the comparison where it's like in the atmosphere, this thing can run out anything. In space, this thing can outrun anything. Down here in the atmosphere, this is a fucking fat cow hauler. Like, it's so bad. Yeah, and so that's where I find all the different moments of tension coming out, where they have like the flares flying out of the back of the ship, and there's all of this, I said it earlier, this manic energy, and oh my god, fuck, it's so good.
Yeah. I mean, it makes sense. In space, you don't have to worry about aerodynamics at all.
No,
all you have to do, all you have to worry about is like thrusters, straight up. That's all you have to worry about, the amount of thrusters and the
directions. But yeah,
well,
at which the thrusters are placed. Yeah, you weren't not saying that.
It makes sense that those are two different things that you have to equate.
It's fucking brilliant. So, and then there's just, obviously there's so much to talk about in this chapter, but I want to jump to the Omega Atomic and the sort of mid speech that Darrow is giving to all of these people that he knows is going to die. There's this liquidation of an entire army, this entire council, the entire Red Reach destroyed. And that poor fucking Red trapped in Darrow's star shell as well.
Oh.
This whole section is insanity. It is fuck.
Yeah. Yeah. In the moment that I was reading that, I really thought that somebody would like take a razor and amputate the Red's arm and like get him out of there. Man, I'm so sad for the dude, but I don't know, from the perspective of like viewing what's happening, the spectacle of reading this fucking horrifying scene, I'm kind of glad that he stayed trapped.
Oh no!
Because we got to see him like listen to Darrow as he gave that just amazing death speech. And we got to see him liquefy. Like, I don't know. It was just so well written. It's fucking horrifying, but it was so well written.
I think the other piece of this that's really important and interesting too is that, like, not only is he giving that speech, right? Not only is he kind of giving that speech to the council, but it feels as though, given kind of the eye movements of Darrow and where he's staring and looking, that he's also giving the speech to the Red. And I think that is an incredibly humanizing moment for Darrow, where he is realizing the cost of this war in live time because of sort of the moments. And it is incredible writing. The sort of explosion that liquefies him, that burns out the shield that Rona has, that does all these different things, is just absolutely fucking nuts. This is a brilliantly written moment. And again, like you said, it is definitely one of my favorite chapters in any book ever.
Yeah. It's so well done.
And then after the aftermath immediately of the nuclear weapon, we get a truly uproarious rallying cry of the Reds in their Drachenjagers, the Helldivers repurposed into something they can man just as well. 5,000 full metal gods ready to hold the line, with Rona riding in the Black Beast and back.
I just have to preface this. You're going to absolutely fucking hate me because I'm going to step on the dick of the description of the Drachenjagers. I think of it like metallic Bowser.
Okay.
Okay. So,
well,
it's described as having a spiky backpack. It's super big and boxy. It's metal. Instead of a head, it's got a cockpit between the shoulders, just like Bowser's head.
Yeah.
The only really difference is that this thing has 6 arms and Bowser has 2.
Is it 6 arms or 6 joints?
It said 6 arms, I think.
I thought that the arms articulated in 6 joints, but it might be 6 arms.
I think it said 6 arms, and they're like guns on the elbows or something like that.
Something like that, yes. How did I skip this? I need to mention this before we resolve your Drachenjager comment. The voice that found me in the Jackal's prison tomb. Reaper, Reaper, Reaper. Look what you have done. Look what you are. In your shadow, nothing can survive. Fucking brilliant. And I don't have a full answer on the other question, but...
I mean, it wasn't a question. It's... There's just like 40-meter tall Bowsers running around with 6 arms. Okay. All right. So a lot of people question this, actually. There is no definitive answer, which is not great. Drachenjager's arms have 6 joints. The precise nature of the joints is unclear. This could mean 6 elbows, a shoulder, and no wrist, or it could mean 4 elbows, a shoulder, and a wrist, or it could mean any combination of the wrist-like or elbowish joints. It does not say arms. Its weaponry included multiple cannons, though, mounted at the elbows, as well as gigantic iron cleavers. So it is a multi-armed thing, but it is not 6 arms. They have different joints, though, which is weird. The gun joints, to me, are probably the reason that you have 6 joints is so that you can actually articulate the guns, right? In a way. Yeah, probably.
That's the most logical thing to me. Anyway, point being, I don't disagree with the rest of your Bowser head description. I think that Bowser's actually fairly close in a strange way. Reading this also got me to revisit and look up to see if it still existed, an old video game series that I played a long time ago called Front Mission, and I played a shit ton of Front Mission 4, and sadly, they haven't released a game since 2009. It's a Square Enix property, but I'm upset. It's one of my favorite turnstile games. Anyway, lots of metal robots in that. Reminded me of that for whatever reason.
Metal robots are awesome.
The best. Most of them are metal robots.
I mean, actually. I think of these generally, like when the description comes around, I think of them as Titans from Titanfall.
Yes. Yeah, I would agree. Especially after playing Titanfall 2 now, which is fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
So the final kind of point here, I just want to bring this up, is the sort of stomping nature. I talked about this at the beginning of Iron Gold and sort of the way that those small clods happen as he's climbing up the stairs. We then get this giant, massive rallying cry, as I discussed, where Darrow says, "Are we Ash?" And we get a boom, boom from the clanking. And there's just this fantastic cacophony of uniting forces that happens underneath Darrow's banner. And at the very end of the chapter, we get a final kind of little moment to set kind of the scene here. Black clouds rise. Lightning shatters the sky. Atalante has shattered our jaw with her fist. With her first punch. Now it's our turn. I lift my sling blade. For the Republic. For Mars. And fuck, dude. This time, reading that, for whatever reason, hit me so hard, I totally welled up and I totally let a tear go. And it just makes me want to have, like, Darrow. It just makes me want Darrow, the Drakensjäger Legion, the Helldiver Legion, to tear them the fuck apart for what they've done.
Yeah. Man, first of all, let me commend you for the stopping point of this section, because it felt like the end of a book. It did.
Fair point.
Like, it felt like this could be the, like, stopping point as a, like, and cliffhanger of a book.
Sure. Yeah, a novella for sure. I feel that. I understand.
Even if there was kind of an alternative way that Iron Gold went, if it continued on with the story a little bit and ended here, I'd be perfectly happy with that. But fuck, dude, I'm so pumped here. Like, I was so ready to keep going.
I think you're going to find a lot of that in this book.
Okay. I was talking to you earlier on, like, just on a phone call earlier today, where I was talking about, like, mail or something like that.
Yeah, getting the mail out to our patrons.
Yep, that's what it was. And just off the cuff, I'm like, dude, this is the best book I've ever read in the world. If this was just empty pages from here on out, I would still see it as, like, my favorite book of all time.
Yeah.
This is... I think actually what I said was, if it's just dog shit for the rest of the book, it'll still be my favorite because of the first couple sections. So,
which is, in a way, like, that is a massive relief to hear, because I have to present all these things like, I hope you like this, PJ, because if you don't, it's going to make for a really bad podcast. Like,
well, I mean, we talked extensively about the Avengers for an entire podcast.
It's true. That was enjoyable.
If you'd like to join our bartender tier on Patreon, you can listen to me rant about the Avengers for 2 hours.
Yeah.
So, like, we can make it work, but this is so fucking good.
Mm-hmm. Dude, this book is so good. I can't. Yep, it is.
Yep, it is.
So, with that, do you have any other comments on this section that you want to make?
So many, but not specifically. Like, I just want to gush about how much I like it.
All right. Sweet.
So, yeah, I think we're good there.
With that, we move into your predictions. You've got 2. We have none from people submitting them this week, but we hope to have more. Please submit them. Lean towards the end of the book, because we have a couple in the middle. I would love to hear your predictions that you'd like PJ to make for the end of the book and the next book. Send them in to us, please, and thank you.
Please.
So, your predictions now, though.
What's that email address that you can send in? If you're not following us on socials, you can send it into Words
No, wordsandwhiskeyshow@gmail.com. Words Whiskey Pod is the social.
Yep, that's it. Yep, wordsandwhiskyshow@gmail.com.
Yep.
Anyway, my first one. Does this little skirmish end before the end of the next section? And I'm thinking no. I'm thinking it's going to go a little bit longer than that.
All right. That's a fair question.
Yep.
So, what's your next one?
In this battle/section, I think, do we want to make a specification on that?
You can call it out how you'd like. So you're saying in this battle next section. So meaning at the end of the liberation of Mercury, or the Battle of Mercury, not the liberation, but the Battle of Mercury, or in the next part?
The end of this battle that's happening actively right now, or at the end of the next section that we're reading until.
Okay. All right.
I'm going section, because then there's no ambiguity on whether or not it might happen later. It's got to be by the end of the section. Okay. Who lives and who dies?
And who tells their story? I'm sorry. I just had to do the Hamilton thing, right? You said.
Okay.
Rolling
right through that.
That's uncomfortable, but what?
I think Darrow lives and loses all of the other Howlers except for Calloway. And he kind of has to live with the weight of all that. Rona dies, but kills Lysander. Alexander and Thraxa both survive, but barely. Ajax survives. Seraphina dies. Atlas survives. Atalantia survives. Orion survives. Pytha dies somehow. And we get a really strange, brief glimpse of the life of Lyria, and she dies of a sudden aneurysm after being tortured.
Well, that sounds like a very interesting list, especially the killing off a POV and a second POV.
We don't know that that's a second POV yet.
Well, it's fair. All that I'm saying is like Lyria was a POV in the previous book, so killing her off this way is fair enough. Lysander dead at the hands of Rona. Okay, all right. So with that, we go into next week. Next week, folks, we are going to be reading chapters 12 through 17. That's going to be pages in the hardcover, 93 through 143. I am so fucking excited. This is going to end part 1.
So we're going to the end of part 1?
Yes.
Or are we going through that?
No, we're going to the end of part 1.
So once you finish part 1, stop there and then listen to our next episode.
Before part 2. Yep. So that's where we're going to leave you for this week.
Thank you, of course, to our producers, Tim and Andrew, as we always thank you, because you are so much more important. But this is what you get. You get a shout out on our podcast for helping keep our show's lights on. Check out all of the links in the show notes. You can find our schedule, Patreon, previous episodes, our website, our socials, all in one convenient spot.
The convenient spot, of course, is within the show notes, but it's also within the link tree that Tim built us. It's fantastic. If you haven't left us a review on iTunes, we'd absolutely love that. Leave us a 5-star review. We might read it out on the podcast. That would be fantastic. Above and beyond that, our Patreon, we host a bunch of other content that we've actually talked about over the course of this show. Join us there, and we would love to have you. The Discord is alive and well, talking about this book, movies, and a lot of the other things that we all love and enjoy.
As far as getting me to say anything to or about Crossland, leaving a 5-star review is a great way to do that.
Are you suggesting that people can leave us a 5-star review and they can write slander about me in there?
It's not slander if it's true.
All right. Fair enough. So thank you all so much for the support. It really means the world to us. We're, of course, stoked and cannot wait to see you next week.